Good day. Welcome back. Today I'm wrapping up the video series on peace and promotion. We've already done the ones on bishops and knights, and it's been quite interesting going through situations where the promotion of a pawn to a knight or a bishop has been required, and we've seen some very interesting tactics in those cases. So moving on now to the case of rook under promotion, which is probably the least interesting of these under promotions, and it's often to do with a rook covers less squares than the queen would, and therefore you can promote to a rook without stalemating the opponent's king. And the other thing is that if you promote to a rook and maybe that's your only pawn, well, you better get at least a rook, because a knight or a bishop alone wouldn't be able to do it. So there's a few factors going on in it. Okay, so let's move across to the capture screen. There we are. There. It's just a random game. I just outlined there on the text what we're actually looking at, right? Rook under promotion. There's two main reasons, or both basically the same reasons. All about avoiding stalemate, but there's a particular tactic called crazy rook, where the defender has a crazy rook, and it's often to avoid stalemate tricks with the crazy rook. You actually promote to a rook, often a second rook rather than a queen. Okay, so we'll just quickly go through the analysis technique. I've done this earlier video, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But first of all, we're using the Lumbris database. It doesn't really matter. We could use Queso or Hydrus. Just similar sort of results come. Then we do a filter for all the rook under promotions, and you get a bunch of them. But as we've discussed in the past, a lot of the under promotions, piece gets taken straight away, or it's a bit of a joke, or somebody's trolling somebody else. So what I then do is you process them for the real ones. And in fact, what we've ended up here is 51 real rook under promotions in the database. And you can see it's comparable to the number of real bishop under promotions and way off the knight under promotion. So last time we did the knight under promotion, we had lots of interesting tactics based on providing checks, actually checkmating or defending pieces and so on by promoting to the knight. We don't get those sorts of things in this case. So that's sort of the numbers of real under promotions, and I just quickly come up with these numbers here. So we've got in total 600,000. I think it's 9 million games in total. 600,000 have a promotion in them, so 6% or so. And there's 9,000 promotes to a rook, 9,000 promotes to a knight, and 2,000 promotes to a bishop. But then once you filter out the not necessary ones, there's only 47 bishop ones, 51 rook ones, which we can go through today, and a big bunch, 1,500 knight ones. So the knight's much more substantial in terms of being required under promotions. Look at the previous videos, you can see some interesting games, even a Carlsen game, which had it in it. Okay, so that's sort of the numbers we wanted to go through. And now we're just going to quickly just sort of go through a tour of a few games, have a look at the sorts of tactics which occur. First game, okay, go back to the rook under promotion. Okay, here's the position here. Wasn't actually the end of the game. The game continued for a while, and you can see the problem here, that it's black to move, pawn's attacked, that bishop cannot protect it, king can't protect it, and if you advance it and promote to a queen, you see the bishop's already covering that square, and then if you promote to a queen, you'll be covering all these squares and that square as well, right? So maybe just highlight the squares. So, but if you promote to a rook, which is what the player did, then that square is open. So that's very, very necessary. You could, of course, promote to a knight and then spend the next 30 or 40 moves trying to checkmate white with a bishop and a knight. You could not promote to another bishop, because then we had two white squared bishops, which wouldn't be very useful. Okay, so there's a very clear example of a necessary under promotion to a rook, or potentially a knight. So let's go to the next game. Go back one move. Exactly the same problem. Going to take the pawn. The bishop's covering the escape square there. So when you promote, once again, you'd be able to promote to a knight or a rook, and you'll be able to win the game, because if the king pops into b2, then the bishop can run away and the knight can... Anyway, who would do that? You just get a rook. Okay, so that's two games, very sort of simple. And let's go to the third game. This one's different. This is a very common pattern where you have a K or H pawn, and then you're promoting. And if you promote to a queen, it's going to be a draw, because you'll be covering the pawn. So you can also promote to a bishop in this position, because you'll hold the pawn, and then the bishop would be of the same color as the corner, and you'd be able to win it. right? So there's a few of these endgame positions like that where you have to under-promote to a bishop or a rook to maintain your win. So let's have a look. Now move down to game number 6, which is the first example of what we're calling this crazy rook situation. Let's go to the promotion move. Now, if you promoted to a queen, let's just do that as an alternative variation. Important thing is it blocks the king in there, and the king's obviously blocked in there. So the king's stalemated, and now you would just check forever. And there's no hiding. Yep, there's the first example of crazy rook. Our rook will just go backwards and forwards on the 7th rank, and there's nowhere for the king to hide. So that only works because of the checkmate situation of the white king. So you just promote to a rook, and 2 rooks, you got to win against 1 rook. No problems there, and it's not going to be stalemate. So crazy rook doesn't work, and the game only lasted a few more moves. We'll threaten checkmate. That we win. So crazy rooks. Okay. Let's have a look at game number 10. I want to have a look at it just to give you a sense of. Go back a few moves and say, this is a way of winning this end game. You've got your pawns advanced kind of as far as possible, and now you just want to do the coup de grace. So check there. It's got to be taken. And then now there is only one winning move. This is what I'm saying. You promote to a queen, it'll be stalemate because the queen will cover particularly that square. Promote to a rook, it'll be win. Promote to a bishop or knight, you won't win because you'd have insufficient material. So one of these good examples of only promote to a rook will win. And the next game is actually exactly the same, I think. Yeah, exactly the same game. So you can see that this tactic is fairly common. Now, there's probably other ways of advancing which don't require the... Anyway, so that's good. You can see this happens quite a bit. Game 15, I've got that down as being a little bit different. Let's have a look at what happens here. Oh, okay, so this is interesting. It's like 2 bishops and a pawn against the rook, and it should be winning. We block, take, clever attempt. Now we can promote to a rook or a bishop or a knight, not a queen. The problem with the queen, once again, the queen will cover that square. And a bishop will also go that square, but a bishop will not go that square. Right? But basically, you promote to a rook and the game's over. And the person resigned. So often people set these traps, maybe some of the speed games, and then once the person's got through the trap, they keep going. Okay, game 19, that's another crazy rook endgame. Let's go back a few moves to when the promotion was done, have a look at what was happening. And yeah, you can see once again that there's no hiding place. So if you promoted to a queen, we would just run backwards and forwards there, continually checking. The king could never take the rook. But when you promote to rook, then you can see that's not stalemate, and the 2 rooks versus 1 will be a relatively easy win. So you can see that definitely popped up quite a few times in this style of endgame. And if you're promoted to, well, in this, obviously you can see that promoted to a knight or a bishop wouldn't be smart, you'd lose your other rook. But so let me keep going. What's the next game I've highlighted? It is game number 26. Let's have a look at that. Okay, this is a repeat of that position we've seen before. King's attacking the pawn can't be protected by the bishop, and you've got to promote. And if you promote, you can go to a rook, can't go to bishop because you're same colour bishop, so basically promotes to rook, and the weaker side then resign, because obviously it was just a little trap at the end. I mean, everybody's entitled to try that. Okay, so I'll wrap up there. I mean, you can see there's another bunch of games there. It sort of goes about 50 games, but you can see there's a couple of common themes in these rook under promotions: avoiding stalemate by promoting to a queen, avoiding crazy rooks, and often it's the bishop can't sort of help defend a pawn, or there's some issue which makes it the only way to win. And a lot of them are sort of a way of crystallizing a king, rook, and 2 pawns against a king and rook endgame. Often the sort of the ending tactic. Okay, so that's the end of this series. I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, obviously the knight and bishop underpromotes were a lot more interesting. So make sure you watch those videos if you haven't. But otherwise, it's good with this little journey together, and it's been really interesting. You know, sort of using the tools we've been using, the open source tools we've been using, Python Chess and Scoutfish, to sort of quickly filter up these things and then have a look at a few interesting games. So I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.